right. All right, well, let's wrap up our day here together.
Okay. Yes. Copy.
So maybe before we start, so I apologize, everybody. I didn't realize those hadn't gotten back to us. So I'm going to be presenting on the 3 chapters anyway. Are people okay not reading and relying on presentation?
Sure. Honestly,
Totally.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I could use one less thing to do.
I would love that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like, we don't have the book. I don't think.
I will email the first years and see if I can get some copies back for the following week.
Some second years.
We're the first year.
Second years.
Good.
Has anyone started it yet?
We're delivering to this.
This needs to turn. I need to ask them to get official copies that go to the bookstore. We've had problems getting them back before. So Heather had an extra thing in the budget, so she asked us, "Hey, does anybody need anything?" And so she kind of like, "Hey, you need some books for that, right? Like you'd like to use this, so I'll get a few copies of it." And you don't. We're not going to charge you for it, so. And you don't have to return it to the bookstore for a fine. They're harder to get back.
Well, how many copies are you short? I bought one. They were asked for one.
I'm gonna get mine on Audible, so I don't need it.
I was gonna do Audible.
Yeah.
So like, do we have enough copies for the rest of that?
If I can get some off of people.
Well, they're on 10.
Yeah, usually in either, I thought they were in my office or the other staffing room, that they always just sat in a stack. So I just went in there to grab them for everybody to, because I know some of you were planning on buying, getting a copy, which I suggested, hey, this would be a great one for you to get a copy, but if not, we have a handful that are just a part of our system that I can hand out.
Sorry.
You
Scared me.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I'll see what I can gather up for next week. All right. So, so we've done for the brain, we've done the brainstem, the limbic system, and so now we're going to move on to the cortex up top. Okay. So here we are with the cortex. So interpersonal neurobiology, I'm not sure you're going to get that this semester. So I just wanted to introduce it to you. We did put it in contemporary theology last year, but that's because Candace was on maternity leave, and I thought the second half of the class to cover for her, and so we put in a couple sessions on interpersonal neurobiology. But I'm not sure that got scheduled in for this year.
Molly talked to us about it in Foundations a bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she came up with experience.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. So that word there, pulling everything together, integration. All right, that's really what Siegel's work is all about. He has the 9 domains of integration, whether it be left hemisphere and right hemisphere, and they have different roles, but they integrate together. The upper brain, the cortex, and the lower brain, the limbic system, and the brainstem, how those link and connect together. So he calls it like the staircase of the brain. You basically, that's what the prefrontal cortex does. That's the role, is it takes all the different parts. He uses kind of an example. How many people were in like band or choir?
Orchestra.
Orchestra? Anything like that. So let's use the musical instruments, okay? How many of you ever walked into a music hall of middle schoolers warming up?
Unfortunately, it's actually
It is.
Had somebody who started orchestra in 3rd grade.
Yep.
No.
But even if it's a high school group or a college group, when they're warming up, they're all playing different things at different paces.
And
with
they're
different
tuning,
sounds.
and
They're
it's
tuning,
awful.
And it's awful. But what happens when the conductor stands up and says, you know, raise your instruments and come in when I tell you to come in, and come in based on your music? Now, they're all playing different parts, right? But when a conductor and the music pull them together, then you have the beauty of the music. Okay, so that's what music is. That's integration. You have unique individual parts that are being integrated together to make something that sounds good, or, you know, if you like a sports analogy, me being a football coach, it's all the different players that they all do their part. Things go well and they integrate together. Choirs are kind of the same thing. Okay? So the cortex is the part of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, that when that develops, starts during the adolescent years, doesn't complete till 25, starts to pull everything together. We call that integration. Remember how we talked about it's not hormones? Okay? What the teen brain does is it goes through a process that we call remodeling. Has anybody ever remodeled something
Yeah.
in their home or apartment?
Yep.
All right? We are just about to finish. We have an old 1910 house that had
Lovely.
plaster lath
Auto walls.
in the walls with rock wool, old knob and two cloth covered wiring.
That
Yeah.
sounded like you just spoke a different language. I didn't recognize a single word you said.
Knob and
When
tube.
did you buy your house? Were you even legally allowed to purchase that with knob and tube electric?
Yeah.
Oh my
That's
god.
cool.
Nikki knows what you're talking
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But so over the course of the 25 years that we've lived there, we finally completely gutted the last two rooms, pulled all of that out. So we're finally finished remodeling. So you're going to get to see some pictures of this process. But the teen brain is going through a remodeling process. So that's why this is not about hormones. That's what it always gets blamed on. But this is what's really going on in the brain. So let's take a look at my kitchen example. All right,
Is it a real kitchen?
this is my old kitchen.
Okay.
All right, so this is the child brain kitchen. All right, you see the linoleum, drawer is broken off. You know what that is?
Dishwasher
It's
machine.
my washing machine.
That's your washing.
The dryer was on the back porch. Go out and do that in 20 below weather.
What?
You
What a
have
house!
this
Clothes.
place now?
This is so crazy.
It's like a college
I feel like
person's
I'm running
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
Yeah, it looks
I was
like
gonna say,
the
But
house
hey,
that we call
we were
the
young and
house.
poor. That's what we could afford. We thought we'd move someday. Here we are. All right, so that's how it started. Then I gutted it. All right, see down there? That's the basement.
Oh no! So we had a very
Oh, boy.
poor. We had bad floors too.
We took off 5 layers of flooring and then had to skill saw the joists because they were bowed. You know, so there's old nasty wiring in there and everything like that. So we completely gutted the entire kitchen room. All right. Again, so you start with the child brain. This is remodeling. This is what's happening with the adolescent brain when it hits adolescence. Remodeling starts with what? Tearing out the old system, right? You take all the stuff that you don't want in there anymore out. And then you find your favorite power tool. That's my buddy, Farm Boy, can Jimmy rig anything. All right. So you know we've got nice insulation in there, sheetrock's going up, pocket door for the bathroom. You know, so we're redoing everything. So we're putting everything back together. Another part of the remodeling process. And then in the end,
Oh, that
looks much better.
You no longer have a college dorm kitchen. You have a nice little kitchen. Okay? This is what's happening in the adolescent brain. Okay? It starts as a child, and you want it to go to an adult brain. Doesn't work like that, does it? You can't just flip it one day, and it goes from a child brain to an adult brain. It has to be torn down and built back up. Okay? So, we've already talked about how 0 to 2 is the attachment phase, right? So in a child brain, 0 to 2, that's when you really want to attune to them and attach with them. 2 to 12, their brains basically turn into sponges. That's, again, where we want to expose them to everything so that they have opportunities to take all this stuff in, and they're just like sponges. They want to play and experiment. I want to try this, I want to try that. And you give them those opportunities. In 12 to 24, that's when the brain starts to specialize. Not because of hormones, but because it's going through this process. So remember all those neural connections? What wires together, fires together? So they're doing all these things when they're young. And all these neurons are firing and connecting with each other. Well, guess what happens when they hit adolescence? The brain basically stops and says, we can't keep this up anymore. Like, we can't do everything the rest of our life. We're going to have to decide who we're going to be and what we're going to do. What do we call that? Identity development. That's where identity development starts. And so the brain starts to take things down so that it can rebuild what it's going to be for the adult brain. That's why we've decided once a student hits like middle school, if you want to play just like one sport or focus on one activity and do that like more of the year, that's more of an age-appropriate time to do that. Like, don't put your kid in one sport or one activity and like this is the only thing you do, you know, all year round, every year. You know, when they're young, you really want to have them experience a lot of different things because that helps the brain grow. When they get older, as they're starting identity development and the brain is starting to specialize, you can do a little bit more of that. Okay? So what the brain is doing in this time, is that anybody heard of the pruning process?
Yeah.
This is the pruning process. Okay? So again, when you do something, the brain says, oh, I guess this is what we're going to do. Let's wire it together. When you stop doing it, it starts to let it go. And so it's starting to prune itself. Now, sometimes things don't work this well. Right? When we went through this process, guess what wasn't available to us for 6 weeks? Our plumbing. Yeah. You know, so we're washing dishes upstairs in the bathtub. Okay? So we had to take out our plumbing. We often, the electricity was turned off. One of our contractors accidentally snipped the thermostat wire as he was doing something downstairs, and we lost our furnace. Okay? Have you ever worked with a student where one day they're managing themselves really well, and then the next day they're completely losing it?
Yep.
And they're losing it for a while, and then a week later, all of a sudden, they're back?
As if it never happened even?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Because sometimes you have to take the plumbing out to upgrade it. You have to turn off the electricity to upgrade it. Another analogy is like blowing a fuse. They blow a fuse for a couple weeks. You're like, what happened to my sweet little child? Or maybe it lasts for 2 years. I don't know. But they kind of go away, and then all of a sudden they're back. So literally the brain is turning itself off and then turning itself back on in different areas as a part of the remodeling process. So just kind of use that as your imagery. The brain over this period of time just constantly, it says it's time to remodel this area, and it takes something out for a while, goes through the process of rebuilding it. So you lose a skill set, you lose an ability. Why can't they do this? They were able to do this last month. Like this, they've always been able to do this. I don't understand why they can't do it anymore. And then it comes back. Okay? So qualities disappear and they come back just like blowing a fuse. Now, then, as you get to this stage, what happens, everybody heard of myelin? I'm going to introduce it to you. Okay? Everybody played with a glow stick before.
Yeah.
The little connectors that connect the myelin. All right? Neuroconnectors, the neurons that we've been talking about. You know, there's 10,000 connectors that come off that want to look for other neurons to connect to. Do they ever actually touch? Nope. They get really, 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 really close. And they pass electrical information back and forth. But what they do then is the thing that you do over and over, like the Olympic athlete, the brain says, we really need this, and it starts to lay a waxy sheet called myelin, like the connector of a glow stick, over the connection point, which then helps strengthen and speed up. So again, the things that you get really good at, guess what? You're laying therapy myelin right now. You're learning these things. You're going to get down in the clinic. You're not going to feel great, but the more you do it, those neurons are going to start to find each other. You're going to start laying myelin. You're going to start gaining more and more confidence, get better and better at what you're doing. We're going to be sitting there applauding you, way to go, second years, because that's what you'll be at that time, or beyond, and you'll be developing. All right? So myelin starts connecting the remaining circuits. So the brain starts with what it builds as a child, that it has to let it go, and then reconnect what it's going to use for the future, and start laying down myelin to make that stronger and stronger. Okay? So, that's the cortex. Any questions about that part of the process in the cortex? Before we leave today, I want you to each write down for yourself 3 points of psychoeducation from the entire day that you might use with parents or family or a teacher or whoever you're working with at some point. Because that's really what I'm giving you today. You know, because a lot of times when you're working with family, part of what you need is psychoeducation pieces. And this is some of the psychoeducation that you can use. So there's the progression. All right. Now, Siegel is a weird person. He self-admits to it. He loves his acronyms. He creates them for everything. Okay? So we are going to now learn, finally, kind of ending off our time. So we've learned kind of how the brain works and how that impacts things. Okay? And that helps us determine like how we should approach students, how we should help parents approach adolescent students. So he calls this the essence of adolescence. So these are 4 things that are key and different in the adolescent brain from the child brain. Okay? So let's take a look at these 4 things. What makes the adolescent brain, now that it's going through this remodeling process, unique from a child brain? The ES of essence, emotional spark. Who's more passionate than a middle schooler? Right? Often a complaint by parents and other people is they have so much energy. So there's a lot of emotional spark. Remember this in the flipping of the lid? Where are emotions? Down here in the limbic system. Okay? Emotions come up in the brain from the lower portions of the brain. The lower brain is pushing up, and what are the emotions and the lower part of the brain pushing up on? The cortex. What is the cortex doing right now? Remodeling. Sometimes it's online, and sometimes it's not. So it's very easy to flip. All right. So that's why, you know, middle school students, high school students, adolescent years, big emotions are coming up from deep within us. The lower brain is pushing up on the upper brain, and the capacity that they had to regulate it is not as strong as it used to be. Okay? So the lower brain is pushing up on the remodeling cortex, which is often what causes the flipping of the lid. So here's a fun game I want to play with you. Here's a parent. That's green. Please describe to me your interpretation of that parent's facial expression.
Looks like a fake smile to me.
Okay. A smile, but a fake smile.
Yeah. Looks
Okay.
like a grimace smile.
A grimace smile. Would others agree? Judge it overall.
I think it's a smile.
Happy? Okay. Okay.
Terrifying.
How would you interpret that?
Don't like it.
There's the angry parent. Okay? And how about that in comparison? Neutral? What?
Complacent.
Complacent? Neutral, complacent? What's that? They look mad? Okay. Yeah, we all, okay. Okay, interesting.
I can tell you why that looks. Yeah, it's the same face my dad has.
So we have smile. Okay, and going back here. So children and adults typically would interpret that in general as a level of smile. Okay? Children and adults would interpret, and adolescents would interpret this as angry. Children and adults would interpret that as neutral. What would an adolescent interpret that as? A neutral face equals hostile to a teenager. There you go. A neutral face is hostile to a teenager. Why would that be? Because they are getting ready to go out in our culture. They are getting ready to go out with their cohort of peers into this new unknown world. Okay? Now, let's say you drive to a new city that you don't know anything about. Well, you might see somebody smiling. You still might be a little bit, like, why are they smiling at me? Walking around. You see somebody angry, because until you know you're safe, you're gonna look at it as not safe. And so the neutral face, a lot of times if somebody comes across and they're smiling, the general sense you get is they're happy. And that's how all three levels will interpret that brain. We all recognize anger, but children and adults will see neutral and just kind of see that as neutral. But because the adolescent brain is making the shift and it's getting ready, it's believing to leave the safety of its home, the safest thing it can do is interpret something as angry until it knows otherwise, or dangerous. So they are really highlighting their fight or flight system in that situation. So, I remember I was at Hudson High School. I was asked 1 to 5 people to come in and do a small presentation. So I did one on depression for a couple different groups of teachers and other staff that came through. And so I did a presentation. At the very end, one of the teachers raised their hand and said, "So, what's one thing that we could do that would, from all that you've talked about, that would be helpful for our students?" My response: smile. The reason being, because I've had so many middle schoolers like, "Oh, that blank, blank, blank teacher, I hate them, they're so angry." And I've coached football and I've worked with all these people that person is so freaking nice. What are you talking about? But think about it. When you go into teaching, especially with middle schoolers, and if you use a serious, neutral face, how do they interpret it? As angry. All right? That's why I've even trained, for therapy, I trained my face to show on the outside what's in the inside. Because I'm generally, people don't always trust that I'm actually typically this happy. And this is actually me. I had somebody from last year I don't believe that's you. But I hopefully it's consistent enough that is me. But I knew coming into therapy, like I also have my serious face. I've always been a deep thinker, so when I would study stuff so I was like, if I start taking in information from people and I'm using my serious trying to figure something out face, I'm going to freak some kids out. So I had to train to show on my outside face, and I think it's translated to the classroom because it's partly how I don't even have to think about it anymore. I think it's just naturally how I've learned to present, to show, again, what's on the inside, because I know, even at this level, if I come in and I'm just even this neutral serious, it's probably going to change the dynamic in here. But think about that at a middle school level or a high school level. It's why they think all their teachers are so horrible. All right? So, and it's because they have this huge emotional spark in their system. The emotions are pushing up on that remodeling brain. Their brain is getting ready to go off, so it translates things as dangerous until it knows otherwise. Here's a huge thing I love to share with parents. An eye roll and a tone of voice. What happens if you take that personally? Are they trying to do that? No. The child. They're having a big emotion come up. An adult has a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They should be able to control it. Who often doesn't control it?
Adults.
Us as parents.
Adults are the worst at it.
Not always, but. So I often have to teach parents because that's a thing in our culture. Like, that's so disrespectful. That eye roll, that tone that they just took with me, as the parent is using an even sharper tone, now with the students. So where are they learning that from? But it's also just it's coming from the automatic part of the brain. A big emotion, eye roll, tone of voice. And then if a parent reacts to that, like the no, we're activating the reactive. So an emotion not acted upon for 90 seconds dissipates. I've experienced this myself with my own kids. I can't tell you how many adults, once they've either given an example of it or learned. My student got mad at me about something. They got really disrespectful. I didn't react to them. And then 2 or 3 minutes later, they came back and apologized. Because they came down. They reacted, and they came down. What would have happened if the parent, don't look at me like that. Don't use that tone of voice with me. What does that do to the brain? Sticks it in the and then the parent's mad, and the child's mad, and now you're just going to have the back and forth that's going on. So when we understand that students, because of what's going on in their brain, they have bigger emotions. They don't have the capacity to regulate that. That's part of what we're helping with this therapist, is to give them skills to, over a long period of time, build the structure to help regulate, but they don't have that right now. So they're gonna automatically react and not have that capacity not to. The positive side, there's almost nobody as fun and full of life than a middle schooler at times. Have you ever been with a middle schooler when they're just doing the thing they're most excited about in the world? Oh my gosh, are they fun to they are so fun to be around when they're just enjoying life. And it can be infectious. They're having a good time, you're having a good time. They're having a bad time. If you can hold on to it, okay, now we can come down from that. All right? So, emotional spark. Different than when they were young, different than when we're older. Number 2, social engagement. So ES, there you go. An emotion not acted upon fades in 90 seconds. SE, social engagement. It's the time of life once again. What are they getting ready to do? Are they going to leave the house and go off with their parents in our culture? Most likely not. They're going to go off with their peers. So who do they need to learn how to navigate time life with? Their peers. So who are they going to want to spend most of their time with? Their peers. So even though we know they still need their parents or need adults in their lives, right? Learning to respect their need for their peers. A lot of parents feel challenged by that. If they're not spending, we have one right now that I'm working with. You know, they're not spending enough time at home. Well, part of that is they're hitting that developmental stage where it's natural for them to want to spend more time with their peers, and to help parents understand it's because those are the people that they're not trying to ditch you necessarily, but they know for me to be safe out there, I've got to learn how to build connections with these people because this is who I'm going to do the next phase of my life with. So social engagement. ESSEN, novelty. Okay? New things. How much do they love new? If the adolescent brain didn't love novelty and want to go after something new, if you are a person who loves the familiar and the comfortable, what are you going to do? Live in your parents' basement until you're 40 or beyond. So I ask at the beginning of the seminar, how many of you would like them to move out of your house someday? All the hands go up. Then this has to happen. Otherwise, like, this is why the brain does it. Because it helps us. You see it in other species as well. They have some of these characteristics, and part of that is they're preparing to not stay with the herd, to not be there, but to move on. So the adolescent brain is doing that. It's preparing itself. If it gets stuck in the familiar and comfortable, it's going to stay home. So that dopamine circuit, the reward circuit, I'm just trying to maybe speed this up a little bit. We already talked about dopamine levels, right?
Yep.
I think I already did this good. So this is where that would come in. So I talk about that dopamine circuit where their baseline actually goes lower. When they do something fun, it goes higher. That's why they're always bored, because it's constantly dropping down lower when they stop doing the fun thing, and then they get really frustrated. So to just help parents understand that, you know, they're not trying to react that way. It's just, you know, if you go to Valley Fair and you go on that power tower and that big drop, you're going to feel it. and they don't have the cortex to regulate it, so they're going to react. So you have to work with them on that. So, you know, their brain is designed for these new things. It's why adolescent brains, you know, we know all the research on the risk-taking that happens in the adolescent brain. And that's kind of a scary thing, but without risk-taking, once again, what won't they do? Leave home. You're going to stay in the safest, most comfortable environment unless your brain kicks into another phase that says, taking a risk is more valuable to me right now than the safe and comfortable. So unfortunately, we lose some students to risky behavior and things that happen, but it's a part of the mechanism of the brain that helps them move on to that next stage of life. And then finally, CE, creative exploration. Oh. Teens have a lower baseline dopamine levels. So the last one, creative exploration. What does that mean? I, as an adult, tell a student to do something from left to right. It's the correct way to do it. I've learned it in my life. It works the best. What do they want to do? What happens if I do it from right to left? Okay? So that's a normal thing. It's that creative exploration. Because think about it. How did you learn that going from left to right was the best and the best way to do it? Was it because somebody else just told you to? Or did you try it from right to left a few times, bump your head, get into circumstances like, I might want to do that from left to right. Or maybe you did it from right to left and you discovered a way that actually works from right to left, that now is beneficial to everybody around you. You know, so that creative exploration can come up with new possibilities and new ideas. So it's a wonderful part of the adolescent brain to do things differently than the way they're normally done. But what do parents and schools and systems often want from us? We know the tried and true, so we want to teach you to do it that way. And parents often get rattled. I remember walking into a building one time and a parent knew me and came up and was really concerned about their child. You know, and they're off doing this and they're doing things a different way and everything, and really concerned about what was going on. And they knew a lot of people that were in the room that we were kind of standing right outside. And I had them turn around and I said, now look at all these people. You know most of their stories, right? Yeah? How many of them went through life and didn't go through the bumps in the road to get to where they are? Well, none of them. So why are we trying to keep our children? I know we want to keep them safe, but the reality is we all got to where we are through many bumps in the road, trying things different ways. And so, you know, just to kind of see that help to settle that parent down quite a bit, like, oh, you know, we don't need the helicopter, we don't need the snowplow, we don't need to do those kind of techniques that keep children from needing to experience uncomfortable, negative things. That is actually how we learn things in life. Now, do we want to put enough protection around so that they, you know, if they have a risky behavior, they don't harm themselves or somebody else? Absolutely. So that's the trick in it all, is how do we put just enough boundary so that they're not that they're safe, they won't harm themselves or another at too high of a level, but they can still take some bumps and bruises that are going to be what kind of teaches them. And maybe they take a different path than you do. And a lot of parents don't see it that way either. All right? So, 5 minutes, and this is usually how it goes. So we're kind of doing the how can we help. So, any questions on the essence of adolescence? Did that make sense? Was it helpful to give some context to these things? I know we're the end of the day on Tuesday, just getting back. So how can we help? And all this is going to be review. It's just going to be, but often can be therapeutic. Like these are things I would take into my therapy. We can help them to understand themselves, and we can work to understand them. That being seen part, both by themselves and them. So a lot of our therapeutic work is helping a client, teen client or an adult client, to understand themselves and their world, and it's our work to understand them. Fun one, the wheel of awareness. Okay, I love doing this with clients where I'll have them write down 3 positive things in life and 3 negative things in life. Which ones do you think we spend most of our time focused on? Mm-hmm. Because focusing on those help keep us safe, right? Mm-hmm. When we're focused on the negative, does the positive disappear? No, we're just not focused on it. If we're focused on the positive, does the negative disappear? No, it's still there. But the brain is afraid if we lose track of the negative, something bad's going to happen. And so this is a way, this is the perplexing and the amazing. Okay? It's helping students not just focus on the negative, or parents focus on the negative of their kids, but help them to, you know, to also see the positive, to kind of keep that balance. We need to spend some time looking at the negative. We need to keep ourselves safe in some ways, but not at the expense of losing sight of the positive. It needs to be a balance of both. So this is Siegel's Wheel of Awareness. We can look at this more in tools at a later time. So help draw the attention to the amazing. Help the parents see the amazing. Help the students see their own amazingness. So draw attention to the amazing. Bids for connection. Who does that come from? Gottman's. So be available for their bids for connection. Woo! You know, so I was chaperoning prom. That student was coming over, needed a bid for connection for that moment. I could have like, oh, I don't have time for you, but no, they needed that time, I gave it to them. Kids they can be subtle. Just them walking down the stairs and being in a room with you, you might be on your computer like, oh, there they are. That might be a subtle like, I actually came down the stairs. I'm here. Pay attention to me. So looking for those little subtle bits where they want to connect with you.
I think that would, I say it in my papers, that's the hardest thing I think would be for me, for as a therapist for children and adolescents, is those subtle things
Mm.
that I just don't pick up on because of autism. like I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's-
Small steps in learning. Connecting them with non-parental adults. 5 to 1, there's research. If you can help students connect with 5 non-parental adults in their life, to have that, that's one thing Jen and I did. We ended up networking with a collection of parents. We all kind of raised our kids together. And I remember my oldest being kind of towards the end of high school, and he was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm gonna go over to Andy's house. I got some stuff I want to talk through with him." And a lot of times, like, "Oh, I'm his dad. Why wouldn't he want to talk with me?" I'm like, "No, go. That's awesome. I'm glad you want to talk with Andy. You need other people in your life." Parent from a yes state with structure and boundaries. We talked about that. Help them find and develop their passions. Find safe options if needed. Care for yourself and remain safe, soothing, and secure. So often we can't remain safe, soothing, and secure for our kids because we haven't done enough of our own self-care. Respect their shift to peer attachments. Be patient when they blow a fuse and help them reconnect. Smile and play. See how complicated these all are? This isn't rocket science. But once you understand the brain and how it operates, it's just learning these simple ways of relating and operating in life, which are great for all relationships, not just working with teens. Exercises, and Brainstorm has all kinds of exercises that help encourage neural connections, which I use in therapy. And this is another one of my favorite phases. It's not who they are at 15, it's who they are at 30. And that's why parents often get very scared, because they see a 15-year-old behavior and they're assuming if they're doing that when they're 30, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. They're just starting remodeling. There are a few that this will be there at 30, and if that's the case, there's probably not a whole lot you can do about it. That there's probably something genetically, mentally there that, a sociopath or something is probably, that's kind of wired into there. There's not a lot you can do. Okay? So, there's one last thing I wanted to say, but maybe I'll have to save it. All right. I can't think of it. So, no reading for next week. If you have it, you can read Brainstorm Chapter 1. If you don't, you can take that off and focus on your other things. And I will just do a more detailed job of talking through that. And then I will work on trying to get some copies for you for the following week.
What do you want us to do with the 3 things that we mentioned or learned from the things that you talked about?
That was just kind of for you.
Oh.
You don't need to turn. I just wanted you to kind of think. Yeah, and I mean, you can put it into a reflection on it, too, kind of the end reflection. But, I just wanted, coming out of the seminar, like, this really was, there's a lot of things you could use for psychoeducation. So I was like, oh.
Those light bulb moments.
Yeah, like, what might you use with a parent out of here? Because people often ask me, like, I don't know what to do with psychoeducation. Well,
what is psychoeducation and how do you present it?
Yeah.
Well, this is great too because you present it in a way that doesn't make, I would say, doesn't make parents feel like they're dumb.
Yeah.
You guys go ahead and go.